Hello everyone. I bet you're watching this video to relax your mind and drift off to sleep. So if you enjoy it, don't hesitate to like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, let me know where you're from and what time you're watching. Are you ready? The exciting story begins right here.
Crystal McDowell's life was full of turmoil and adversity from the beginning. Born to parents who had named her after the drug crystal meth, she faced a challenging childhood. Her parents, who died within 6 months of each other when Crystal was just 11 years old, succumbed to complications from AIDS, which they contracted through substance abuse. This tragic loss left Crystal orphaned and left to fend for herself. In her teenage years, Crystal faced even more hardships. She was abducted by a man and held captive in a chicken coop, where she was sexually assaulted for several days. However, Crystal displayed incredible strength and resilience, escaping and evading her captor. Eventually, Crystal made her way to Baytown, Texas, where she found refuge with her aunt and uncle. Despite enduring the abuse she suffered as a child, Crystal was determined to make a better life for herself. She worked tirelessly to overcome her struggles and break free from the shackles of her past. It was in Baytown that Crystal met Steve McDowell. Steve, known for his playful nature and love for video games and fast cars, was everything Crystal longed for. His sweet, kind, and funny demeanor won her over instantly. Crystal's friends couldn't help but notice how happy she seemed to be with Steve. They thought Crystal and Steve made a perfect couple. Crystal worked as a flight attendant with ExpressJet, which allowed her and Steve to take frequent trips all over the USA, enjoying the benefits of her airline perks. After they married, Crystal and Steve had 2 children, Madden and Maui. It was evident that Crystal loved them deeply. She was a dedicated mother who prioritized her children's happiness and well-being. From the outside, it appeared that Crystal and Steve and their children were the perfect family. However, hidden beneath the surface, Crystal was growing increasingly dissatisfied with her marriage. After 10 years of marriage, she decided to end her relationship with Steve. This decision was met with resistance from her husband, who did not like the idea of a divorce. While Crystal waited for the keys to her new home, which was being remodeled, she continued to live with Steve and their children. It was a challenging situation for all of them as they navigated the emotions of a pending divorce. Despite the difficulties, Crystal remained determined to create a better future for herself and her children. By 2017, Crystal had turned 37 years old. She had made significant changes in her life, pursuing a career in real estate. This time marked a new chapter for Crystal, as she was looking forward to new beginnings in her new home. On August 25, 2017, Crystal had plans to meet up with her family to watch the highly anticipated Mayweather and McGregor fight. Excitement was in the air as friends and family gathered to watch the highly anticipated match. However, Crystal never showed up. Initially, no one seemed to worry too much about Crystal's absence. They knew that she was busy juggling her responsibilities as a working mother. Perhaps she was just running late or had encountered some unexpected circumstances. However, as the night went on, and Crystal failed to reply to texts and calls, concerns started to grow. After waiting more than 24 hours without hearing from Crystal, her family made a heartbreaking decision. They contacted the Chambers County Sheriff's Department to report her missing. A deputy was immediately dispatched to Crystal's home, where he questioned her ex-husband, Steve. Upon his arrival, the deputy questioned Steve about Crystal's whereabouts. Steve, who had recently been divorced from Crystal, informed the detectives that Crystal had begun a new relationship after their separation. He said that there were nights when Crystal would disappear without informing him of her whereabouts. As he spoke to Steve, something in his tone caught the detective's attention. The deputy, with his keen intuition, had suspicions about Steve. With mounting concern, the deputy decided to call for backup. A seasoned detective arrived at the scene and joined the deputy. Upon speaking with Steve, the detective noticed his wedding band still on his finger. This odd detail piqued his interest. Crystal and Steve had been divorced for 6 months. Although Steve was cooperative, the detective noticed something off about his demeanor. Given the unusual circumstances surrounding Crystal's disappearance, the detective involved the district attorney. The district attorney, having read the reports, immediately suspected foul play. With mounting evidence pointing towards a possible homicide, she ordered further investigation. One fact that caught the district attorney's attention was that Crystal and Steve were divorced yet still living together. Furthermore, Crystal had a new boyfriend. The DA's first thought was that Steve had something to hide. Despite the initial speculation, the detective on this case had a different option. While it was possible that Steve could have played a role in Crystal's disappearance, the detective believed there were other factors to consider. The detective believed that Crystal's boyfriend could provide valuable insight into her disappearance. Crystal's disappearance puzzled the detectives as they sought to uncover the truth behind her disappearance. They learned that the man she had gone out with on August 24, 2017, was Paul Hargrave, a local man who managed a jewelry store that had been a fixture in the neighborhood for over 50 years. According to Paul, he and Crystal had gone out together that night, and upon her return, she went back to his house with him. The following morning, while Paul was in the shower, Crystal left his home. Paul provided security camera footage of Crystal leaving his residence on August 25th at 7:35 a.m. The video showed Crystal getting into a black Mercedes coupe and driving away from Paul's driveway. Steve McDowell and Paul Hargrave were immediately considered suspects in Crystal's disappearance. However, the detectives realized that other potential persons of interest still needed to be investigated further. As the detectives delved into the case, they discovered some intriguing details about Crystal's marriage. It was discovered that throughout her marriage, Crystal had engaged in multiple extramarital affairs with flight attendants and pilots, both male and female. The discovery of these extramarital affairs raised suspicions among the detectives. They wondered if there was a possibility that an angry spouse had gone after Crystal, seeking revenge. However, there was no evidence that these affairs had anything to do with her disappearance. The investigation into Crystal's disappearance hit a dead end when Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Baytown. This massive storm caused widespread devastation, with half the county submerged in floodwaters. The heavy rain continued for days, making it difficult for the investigation to proceed. Crystal's disappearance became overshadowed by the hurricane and its aftermath. People lost their homes, cars, and even their lives in the storm's destruction. The Chambers County Sheriff's Department faced limited resources and was forced to redirect all personnel to assist in hurricane search and rescue efforts. With the attention of the officers supposed to be working on Crystal's case diverted to the hurricane response, her family was responsible for picking up the investigation. Friends and family members spent the days tirelessly sharing posts about Crystal's disappearance on various social media platforms, such as Facebook and Instagram. They spread the word far and wide, hoping to gather any leads or information that would lead to her whereabouts. One of Crystal's cousins received a message from a friend. The friend informed them that they had recently seen a Snapchat image depicting Crystal's vehicle parked in a Motel 6 parking lot near Interstate 10. Intrigued by this claim, Crystal's cousin immediately sought to verify the information. Upon seeing the Snapchat image, they recognized the license plate and confirmed that it was indeed Crystal's car. With the confirmation, Crystal's cousin immediately informed her family and the police about the potential lead. However, due to severe flooding on the roads in Chambers County, reaching the site of the motel proved challenging. Instead of traditional vehicles, they opted to use airboats to navigate through the flooded areas. Upon arriving at Motel 6, Crystal's family and the police were met with sight that confirmed their worst fears. Her car was parked haphazardly in the parking lot with the keys in the ignition. It appeared that whoever left Crystal's car there did so with the intention of having it stolen. The Mercedes was subsequently towed to the crime lab garage for processing, but regrettably, no evidence was found that could shed light on Crystal's whereabouts. Even Dateline, the popular news television investigation series, dedicated segments to Crystal's disappearance. But unfortunately, these efforts did not yield any relevant information. 1 week after Crystal's disappearance, the detective realized he needed additional assistance in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. He reached out to the Texas Rangers, who gladly provided their assistance. The lead Texas Ranger assigned to the case conducted the first formal interview with Steve McDowell, Crystal's husband. Steve stated that he had not seen Crystal since she had left for her date on August 24th. From the very beginning, Steve's body language appeared peculiar to the Ranger. Despite Crystal's sudden disappearance, Steve did not exhibit the palpable worry one would expect from someone in such a situation. However, Crystal's friends and family remained steadfast in their support of Steve. Crystal's loved ones knew Steve personally and felt that he could not possibly be responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They emphasized his loving nature as a father to Madden and Maui, doubting that he would ever do anything to hurt their mother. The Ranger approached Steve and asked if he would be willing to take a lie detector test. Steve agreed, seemingly confident in his innocence. However, the results of the test were shocking. Steve failed miserably, raising even more questions about his involvement in Crystal's disappearance. Paul Hargrave, Crystal's boyfriend, who was also considered a potential suspect, also took a polygraph test. Just like Steve, Paul failed the lie detector test. With both Steve and Paul failing the lie detector tests, the district attorney started to wonder if there was a possible joint effort to conceal the truth about Crystal's disappearance. By this stage, everyone involved was convinced that foul play was involved and that Crystal was deceased. However, there was one important question that remained unanswered. Where was her body? If her remains had been disposed of in one of the bayous in Baytown, there was a high likelihood that her body would have been transported to the Gulf of Mexico, making it virtually impossible to discover. In an effort to locate Crystal and bring closure to her family, a search was organized that involved Texas EQUA's search team and volunteers. The search took place on September 9th, with close to 100 people participating in the search efforts. The searchers adopted a grid-based approach, dividing the area into sections and systematically covering each foot by ATV and airboat. Despite the extensive efforts put forth by everyone involved, no sign of Crystal could be found. As the search continued into the wetlands, the Texas Rangers remained steadfast in their determination to find those responsible for Crystal's disappearance. They worked tirelessly to piece together the events and piece together a potential motive behind Crystal's disappearance. The possibility arose that her ex-husband or her boyfriend could have been involved, although no evidence was found to support this theory. The Ranger, recognizing the potential for CCTV footage, had officers canvass the area around the motel where her car was discovered, searching for homes and businesses equipped with security cameras. Fortunately, several establishments had security cameras, and the Ranger was determined to uncover any footage that might help shed light on Crystal's disappearance. After spending hours searching through countless hours of footage, the Ranger came across footage of a person parking Crystal's car in the motel parking lot on Saturday, August 26th, at 6:37 a.m. The footage provided a clear image of the man, but the Ranger couldn't immediately identify the person. As the Ranger continued his analysis of the footage, he noticed that the man in question got out of Crystal's Mercedes and walked away from the vehicle. With the suspicion that this person could be Crystal's ex-husband, Steve, the Ranger's attention intensified. In a separate video captured 5 hours later by a different security camera, a blue car pulled into the pump at a gas station located next to Motel 6, and this blue car, a rare Mustang GT, matched the description of Steve McDowell's vehicle. That revelation strengthened the Ranger's belief that the person seen parking Crystal's car at Motel 6 could have been Steve himself. Steve's actions at the gas station raised suspicion. Instead of filling his tank, Steve walked towards the Motel 6 parking lot, where he appeared to be looking at Crystal's car. The Ranger speculated that Steve may have returned to the parking lot earlier to check if anyone had stolen Crystal's car. He had left the keys in the ignition, expecting someone to eventually take advantage and steal the vehicle. If Steve was responsible for her disappearance, how did he return home? The distance between the location where Steve parked Crystal's car and his home is significant, and Steve would have been on foot, making this an unlikely journey. So the Ranger decided to take a closer look at the CCTV footage, from surrounding businesses and homes to find any additional clues. Upon further investigation, the ranger discovered footage of a man riding a bike in the rain along the Interstate 10 service road at 7:05 a.m., approximately 25 minutes after Crystal's car was left in the parking lot. This bike had distinctive mag wheels and reminded the ranger of a similar bike he had seen in the McDowell garage. During one of his interviews with the ranger, Steve mentioned that he had been shopping at Walmart on Saturday morning. The ranger, intrigued, decided to review the CCTV footage from the store. This footage from Walmart, located across the street from Motel 6, revealed a peculiar sequence of events. A man resembling Steve was seen arriving at Walmart Saturday morning in a hooded sweatshirt, paying for a bike with mag wheels and cash just minutes after Crystal's vehicle was abandoned in the Motel 6 lot. Upon reviewing this evidence, the ranger decided to summon Steve back to the police department for a follow-up interview. During their encounter, the ranger confronted Steve with all the evidence they had gathered against him. However, Steve denied any involvement in Crystal's disappearance. Despite the denial, the ranger remained convinced that Steve was the killer. He was positive Paul Hargrave was innocent and Steve was solely responsible for Crystal's disappearance. While the ranger believed they had sufficient evidence to charge Steve with murder, there was one crucial piece of evidence they still lacked: Crystal's body. The lack of physical remains hindered their efforts to establish a watertight case against Steve. One of the main reasons why the DA wanted to find Crystal's body was to secure a guilty verdict for murder. Without a body, proving a murder charge can be more challenging, as it relies on circumstantial evidence and witness statements. Having a physical body would strengthen the DA's case and provide concrete evidence to convince a jury. Furthermore, locating Crystal's body was crucial for the well-being of her family. Her loved ones deserved closure and needed to know what happened to her. The absence of answers was causing immense distress, and locating Crystal's remains would provide some relief in answers to their questions. Another factor that influenced the DA's decision to locate Crystal's body was a series of disturbing statements made by her ex-husband Steve. People had informed the Texas Ranger that after Crystal filed for divorce, Steve made alarming comments about murder and taking his own life. The Ranger and the DA were concerned for the and Steve's children, Madden and Maui. Given the potential dangers, the DA made the decision to remove the children from their father's custody and place them in protective services. In order to convince Steve to cooperate, the DA presented him with a counteroffer. The DA stated that if Steve was willing to take them to Crystal's body, they could reconsider allowing him to see his children again. However, Steve had a different proposal. He asked if he could go home that night in the following morning, promising that he would tell them everything and lead them directly to Crystal's body. This offer by Steve posed a dilemma for the DA. On one hand, it provided an opportunity to potentially find Crystal's body and uncover the truth. However, on the other hand, it would depend on Steve's reliability and willingness to cooperate. With a verbal agreement, the district attorney allowed Steve to return home that night, knowing they were taking a risk. The possibility existed that Steve might flee or harm himself, effectively leaving Crystal's fate unknown. However, the next morning on September 9th, the DA and the Texas Ranger arrived at Steve's home. Steve answered the door, and during his interview with the Ranger and the DA, he shared his version of the events. Steve revealed that he was aware of Crystal's numerous affairs throughout their marriage. When he confronted her about these issues, Crystal made it clear that she wanted him to stay out of her business. According to Steve, Crystal told him that she had sought sex outside of the marriage because she felt he was not dominant enough in the bedroom. As the Ranger and the DA sought information about the day Crystal went missing, they employed a sympathetic approach to elicit a confession from Steve. The Ranger feigned empathy, hoping to create an environment that allowed Steve to feel comfortable and relaxed. They intended to obtain crucial details about what actually happened to Crystal on that fateful day. Despite their efforts, Steve remained tight-lipped about Crystal's disappearance. Eventually, Steve confessed. According to Steve, before her disappearance, Steve and Crystal had a heated argument. Crystal revealed to Steve that she no longer loved him, leading to a confrontation. Steve, reacting impulsively, admitted to suffocating Crystal. However, he claimed that he never intended to harm her and that the incident was purely accidental. Following Crystal's death, Steve took immediate action to conceal her remains. Steve confessed he wrapped her body in trash bags, placing it in the trunk of her Mercedes. He then drove to a secluded location where he threw Crystal's lifeless body into a ravine. Steve's willingness to lead the authorities to Crystal's body seemed to offer a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. However, there was a catch. He stipulated that the death penalty be removed as a viable option in exchange for leading them to her remains. The district attorney, mindful of the futility of finding Crystal's body without Steve's cooperation, reluctantly agreed to his request. To unravel the mystery surrounding Crystal's disappearance, Steve accompanied the ranger and the DA on the search. This path was Needle Point Road, a narrow street nestled amidst heavy wooded land. Eventually, the ranger came upon Crystal's body. When it was found, the condition of the body was horrifying. Barely anything was left. After Steve was arrested and charged with Crystal's murder, it was revealed that the defense team of Steve was aiming to claim the sudden passion clause as a defense. This defense strategy allowed Steve and his team to blame Crystal's death on her alleged provocation, potentially reducing or dropping the murder charge altogether. In Texas, sudden passion refers to a state of mind characterized by intense emotions, such as rage or terror, that overwhelm an individual and result in impulsive and clouded thinking. To qualify for the sudden passion defense, the defendant must prove that the victim's provocation directly led to their actions. If Steve and his legal team succeed in presenting the sudden passion defense, the murder would be classified as a second-degree felony, carrying a sentence of 2 to 20 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. On the other hand, if convicted of first-degree murder, Steve would face a harsher penalty, with the possibility of serving 5 to 99 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. The sudden passion defense in Crystal's case ignited a debate among legal scholars and societal stakeholders. Critics argued that this defense strategy effectively blamed the victim for their own fate, disregarding the perpetrator's guilt. Supporters of the defense argued that it provides an outlet for individuals to take responsibility for their actions while still acknowledging mitigating circumstances. However, the DA believed that this was a clear case of premeditated murder. In order for the decision to be upheld, all 12 jurors needed to agree on this as well. After a year of pretrial hearings and motions, Steve's trial finally began in June 2019. The prosecution presented their case, aiming to convince the jury that Steve was indeed responsible for Crystal's murder. One key piece of evidence presented was Steve's confession to the authorities. This confession provided crucial information, helping to establish his guilt. Furthermore, the prosecution presented CCTV footage of Steve parking Crystal's car in the motel parking lot. In a heart-wrenching moment, Crystal and Steve's children were brought in to testify. Steve and Crystal's now 7-year-old daughter, Maui, took the stand and described to the jury what she witnessed the night her mother was killed. According to Maui, her parents were engaged in a heated argument about Crystal being with another man. She testified that during the fight, she saw her father place his hands over her mother's nose and mouth. Maui stated that she witnessed her mother struggling to breathe and eventually losing consciousness. After her mother stopped moving, Maui claimed that her father told her to stay inside her bedroom and not to tell anybody about what she had just witnessed. Maui explained to the court that she felt frightened and confused by what happened. In stark contrast to Maui's testimony, Steve's defense put forth a different version of events. They claimed that Maui learned about her mother's murder from Crystal's relatives and had created a fabricated story around it. The defense argued that Maui was repeating what she had been told and was not a reliable witness. Although defense attorneys advised against it, Steve ultimately took the stand in his own defense, recounting the events that led to her tragic demise. With tears streaming down his face, Steve presented a completely different version of events than what he told detectives during his confession. According to Steve, the night Crystal died unfolded in a sudden and unforeseen event. What started as a heated argument spiraled out of control, leading to an impulsive decision on his part. Frustrated, upset, and mad, Steve claimed that he resorted to violence in an attempt to calm her down. In a misguided effort to defuse the situation, he placed Crystal in a bear hug, hoping to restrain her and bring her back to a state of rationality. However, what happened next took him by surprise, Steve claimed. Crystal suddenly went limp in his arms. Steve testified that he had no idea what had happened, stating that he had never intended to harm her intentionally. The district attorney hearing Steve's testimony was left stunned. To the DA, the idea that he had effectively hugged Crystal to death seemed unfathomable. It was an unprecedented allegation that left the courtroom in disbelief. As the case went to the jury, the DA found himself worrying about the possibility of a mistrial. The jury's request to review Steve's confession video further heightened these concerns. A mistrial would mean starting the entire process over again, a prospect that weighed heavily on the prosecution's mind. 1 hour after the jury requested to see the footage, they returned, and their verdict was delivered. Jurors found Steve guilty of murder, delivering justice for Crystal. This guilty verdict brought a measure of closure to her family and loved ones, who had been left searching for answers amidst the darkness that enveloped their lives. During the sentencing phase, the defense put forth the argument that Crystal's murder was a sudden passion, an attempt to reduce the severity of Steve's punishment. However, the jury rejected this claim, choosing to uphold the severity of the crime. Steve was sentenced to serve a 50-year prison sentence. Imagine a heartwarming tale of family reunion, filled with joy and hope. But what if this idyllic scenario took a dark and twisted turn? This case is a chilling reminder that even the most innocent-looking relationships are in fact the most disturbing. Meet Stephen and Katie, father and daughter, their lives intertwined by fate and circumstance. Their unusual family relationship, hidden from the world, would soon become the center of a tragic saga. What begins as a seemingly ordinary story of family reunion would soon take a horrifying turn. The unexpected twists and turns of their lives would lead to consequences that no one could have imagined, forever altering the course of their destinies. On April 12, 2018, a seemingly ordinary day turned into a nightmare for the Plattle family. Stephen and Katie Plattle, father and daughter, were at the center of a horrifying series of events. Events that would forever change not only their lives, but the lives of those around them. Hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary lives, a forbidden love affair had unfolded between Stephen and Katie. An evil family truth and how it could stay hidden. It had to come out, and when it did, it made every living soul question the basics of the most pure relationships humans have. They understood that this was not the right approach, and their actions led to catastrophic consequences, quite contrary to what they had anticipated. There would be a series of events that would till the end serve as a tragedy in the lives of the affected one. Join us as we dive into the chilling tale of Stephen and Katie Plattle. Stephen Plattle came from a relatively ordinary upbringing in New York. Little is known about his childhood or adolescence, but it was during his young adulthood that his life took a dark turn. In 1995, at the age of 20, Stephen met Alyssa Garcia, a 15-year-old girl, online. Despite the age difference, they quickly formed a bond and had an immediate connection. Despite Alyssa's young age, Stephen was drawn to her, and their relationship blossomed into a secret romance. Alyssa, a sophomore in high school, was swept away by Stephen's charms and attention. Innocent as she was, she could not see through the manipulative tactics he was employing to groom her. Stephen carefully cultivated their relationship, keeping it hidden from Alyssa's family and friends. He was so driven by his desires that he went from New York all the way to Texas to meet her. Their relationship grew increasingly intense, culminating in Alyssa running away from home to be with Stephen in New York. She cut off ties with her family and friends, blinded by her love for him. Katie, born Denise Plattle in 1998, was the product of Alyssa and Stephen's relationship when Alyssa got pregnant at the age of 16. As a young child, Katie experienced firsthand the abuse and neglect inflicted on her by her father. When she was born in 1998, it quickly became evident that Stephen exhibited concerning traits that would foreshadow the violence to come. According to Alyssa, Denise's mother, Stephen's abuse tendencies emerged almost immediately. Alyssa recounted harrowing details of Stephen's treatment of their infant daughter. He would do things like cover her mouth when she would cry, He pinched her all over her body until she turned black and blue. The abuse escalated to the point where Stephen, overwhelmed by Denise's cries, resorted to placing her in a cooler or ice chest to silence her. Sometimes he would leave a blanket slightly ajar to keep a crack open, but other times he would shut it completely, forcing Alyssa to wait outside. When she was finally allowed to open it, Alyssa would find Denise gasping for air, drenched in sweat and covered in bruises. Alyssa, realizing the danger Stephen posed to Katie, made the heartbreaking decision to place her daughter for adoption. She knew it was the only way to ensure Katie's safety and give her a chance at a better life. She wanted her daughter to have a future filled with love and safety, qualities that were glaringly absent in her home with Stephen. Alyssa's fears for Denise's well-being overshadowed her own maternal instincts, leading her to believe that relinquishing her parental rights was the best choice. Katie, whose name was changed from Denise at the time of her adoption, was taken in by the loving Fusco family. They provided her with a stable and supportive home. She grew up surrounded by love and encouragement, unaware of the dark secret that connected her to her biological parents. Despite the challenges and abuse, Alyssa and Stephen remained together. They eventually married in 2006, after Stephen moved to Richmond, Virginia. In 2016, Katie, now an adult, felt a growing desire to learn more about her biological family. Driven by curiosity and a longing for answers, she embarked on a journey to find her birth parents. Through social media, she managed contact with Alyssa, her biological mother. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, Katie reached out to Alyssa, sending her a message expressing her desire to connect. Alyssa, who had been searching for Katie for years, was overjoyed to receive her message. After months of online communication, Katie decided to visit Alyssa in North Carolina. The reunion was a bittersweet moment, filled with both joy and uncertainty. Katie met her biological mother for the first time, and they quickly formed a bond. Following the reunion, Katie made a difficult decision to take a gap year from college and move to North Carolina to live with her biological family. This decision was met with mixed reactions from her adoptive parents, who were supportive but also concerned about the potential challenges she might face. Alyssa's excitement was tempered by the living arrangements within the household. Stephen, Katie's biological father, was sleeping on the couch while Alyssa occupied the bedroom. Katie was given her own room, but she spent most of her time with Stephen and her two younger sisters. At the time when Katie decided to move in with her biological family in August 2016, Stephen and Alyssa were already separated and sleeping in different rooms. Katie, unaware of her father's past, quickly developed a close bond with him. She spent most of her days at home with him and her two younger sisters. Alyssa, overjoyed with her firstborn, was happy to have Katie living with them. However, she soon noticed concerning changes in Stephen's behavior. He began dressing differently, wearing tight clothes and growing his hair out, seemingly in an attempt to look younger and close to Katie's age. 6 weeks after Katie's arrival, Alyssa discovered that Stephen was no longer sleeping on the couch, but had moved to the floor of Katie's bedroom, a move that deeply unsettled her. Alyssa confronted Stephen about his inappropriate behavior, reminding him of his violent past and warning Katie to be cautious around him. However, Katie brushed off her concerns, believing that Stephen had changed and that she could trust him. This response revealed the extent to which Katie had already been manipulated and groomed by her father. Alyssa's unease grew as she noticed the striking physical similarities between Katie and her younger self. One day, she could no longer ignore the disturbing dynamic between Stephen and Katie. She confronted them both, sparking a heated argument that ended with Stephen and Katie storming out of the house together. 3 months later, in November 2016, Alyssa gathered the courage to leave Stephen, taking her 2 daughters with her and filing for divorce. This decision left Stephen and Katie alone in the house, free to explore their twisted desires without interference. In May 2017, Alyssa made a shocking discovery while cleaning her 11-year-old daughter's room. The girl's journal revealed that Stephen and Katie were sexually involved, that Katie was pregnant with Stephen's child, and that the 2 children had been told to refer to Katie as their stepmother. The journal entry stated, "She is pregnant and gained weight. And my dad calls her baby also his baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad says that she's my stepmom. WTF. He doesn't even want me to call her sister anymore. But in nature, she's only my sister. Does she see me as a daughter or a sister? Katie now tells me sometimes to get the F up. Alyssa immediately confronted Stephen, who confirmed the relationship and Katie's pregnancy. She was horrified and called the police to report the incestuous relationship. Stephen admitted to Alyssa that he'd been head over heels in love with Katie, and that this feeling had outweighed the issue of them being biologically related. Despite the ongoing police investigation, Stephen and Katie continued their relationship. On July 20th, 2017, they got married and parked in Maryland, lying on their marriage documents about their relation. The wedding was attended by Stephen's mother and Katie's adoptive parents, who were aware of the situation but felt powerless to intervene. In September 2017, Katie gave birth to her and Stephen's son, Bennett Kieran Paddle. The couple moved to a house in Knightdale, North Carolina, hoping for a fresh start. However, their happiness was short-lived. In January 2018, Stephen and Katie were arrested and charged with incest. Despite their charges, they were released on bond but were ordered to have no contact with each other. Custody of Bennett was granted to Stephen's mother, and Katie moved back in with Tony and Kelly Fusco, her adoptive parents. She informed Stephen over the phone that she did not want to continue their relationship. After being released on bail, Stephen and Katie were subjected to a court order prohibiting them from having contact with each other. This separation forced Katie to return to New York while Stephen was barred from North Carolina and was living in a hotel room in Virginia. However, on March 16, 2018, the restrictions were lifted, allowing Stephen to return to his home in North Carolina, which was conveniently located near his mother, Grace, who had custody of their son, Bennett. As the days passed, the emotional strain of their situation weighed heavily on both Stephen and Katie. On April 12, 2018, a pivotal moment occurred when Katie called Stephen and informed him of her decision to end their relationship. She expressed her desire for a divorce, stating that the relationship had become toxic and was taking a toll on her well-being. Katie articulated her need to reclaim her life, pursue her interests in art and digital advertising, which she wanted to study in college, and ultimately to break free from the unhealthy dynamic that had ensnared her. This decision was a significant turning point for Katie, as the distance from Stephen allowed her to reflect on the gravity of their situation. She began to recognize the manipulation and control that had defined their relationship. However, Stephen did not take the news lightly. Enraged by Katie's declaration, he exploded in a fit of anger, feeling betrayed and rejected. This emotional turmoil ignited a dangerous desire for revenge, as Stephen sought to retaliate against Katie for what he perceived as her abandonment. Stephen's motivation for his subsequent actions were deeply rooted in a mix of anger, jealousy, and a desperate need to exert control. His history of violent outbursts and unpredictable behavior suggested that he was prone to extreme emotional reactions. The prospect of losing Katie, whom he had groomed and manipulated, triggered a visceral response. In his mind, Katie's decision to leave him was not just a rejection. It was a personal affront that he felt compelled to avenge. The psychology of revenge played a significant role in Stephen's mindset. Research indicates that individuals acting out of anger or jealousy often engage in retaliatory aggression, driven by an intrinsic desire to restore the perceived balance of power. For Stephen, the thought of Katie moving on without him was intolerable. He likely believed that by taking drastic measures, he could reassert his dominance and eliminate the pain. On the evening of April 11, 2018, around 7 p.m., the tragic sequence of events began when Stephen Paddle, filled with rage and desperation after his daughter Katie informed him of her decision to end their incestuous relationship, called his mother Grace. He told her he was on his way to pick up his 7-month-old son, Bennett, with the intention of driving to New York City so that Katie could care for him while both parents await trial for their incest charges. However, this plan quickly unraveled as Stephen's emotional state deteriorated. Instead of taking Bennett to see Katie, Stephen returned to his home in Knightdale, North Carolina, where he committed the unthinkable act of murdering his own child. While the exact details surrounding Bennett's death are not publicly available due to his status as a minor, reports indicate that he died from asphyxiation with compression of the torso, suggesting a deliberate and brutal act. After killing Bennett, Stephen concealed his body in a closet, a chilling indication of his mental state and the gravity of his actions. The tragic events of the evening of April 11th were only the beginning. In a fit of rage and depression, Stephen Paddle could not accept Katie's decision. After murdering their 7-month-old son, Bennett, in a brutal act of filicide, he embarked on a 600-mile drive from North Carolina to New York, fueled by the same lust and desire for revenge. He arrived at the home of Katie's adoptive parents, Anthony and Kelly Fusco, parking his blue minivan across the street in the parking lot of a nearby liquor store. From there, he patiently stalked the family, waiting for the moment they would leave for their routine visit to Katie's grandmother's house in Waterbury, Connecticut. On the morning of April 12th, Stephen's patience paid off. As anticipated, Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, emerged from their home, ready to begin their day. They climbed into their Toyota pickup truck, completely unaware of the danger lurking just a short distance away. Stephen followed closely behind in his minivan, his mind consumed with rage and betrayal. As they approached an intersection, the truck came to a stop at a red light. In that moment, Stephen seized the opportunity. He pulled up alongside their vehicle, rolled down his window, and brandished an arrow assault-type rifle. Witnesses later recounted the horror of that moment, as they watched Stephen open fire on the truck, unleashing a barrage of bullets into the cabin. The sound of gunfire echoed through the quiet streets of New Milford, Connecticut, as Stephen emptied his weapon into the truck. Katie and Anthony were struck multiple times in the torso and head, their lives extinguished in an instant. An off-duty firefighter, who happened to be in the vicinity, witnessed the massacre unfold and quickly dialed 911 to report the shooting. In a frantic call to dispatchers, the firefighter described the scene, stating, "Someone just went by shooting this guy in the truck." The urgency in his voice conveyed the gravity of the situation, as he provided details about the vehicles involved, a blue minivan with South Carolina plates. As the police arrived at the scene, they found the bodies of 20-year-old Katie Pladdle and her 56-year-old adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, still strapped in their seats. Both had been killed instantly, victims of Stephen's uncontrollable rage. The investigation began immediately, with law enforcement searching for the vehicle that had fled the scene. Meanwhile, Stephen's mother, Grace, was in a state of panic. After Stephen had confessed to her about the murders, she called 911, revealing the chilling details of her son's actions. The police quickly mobilized to locate Stephen, who had driven away from the scene of the double murder. Witnesses provided descriptions of the blue minivan, and law enforcement began to piece together the timeline of events. The search intensified as investigators realized the extent of the tragedy that had unfolded. After committing the horrific double murder of his biological daughter, Katie Pladdle, and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, Stephen Pladdle fled the scene in a state of turmoil. The adrenaline from the shooting coursed through his veins, but it was quickly replaced by a chilling realization of what he had done. As he drove away from the intersection in New Milford, Connecticut, he was consumed by a mix of rage, despair, and guilt. In the aftermath of the murders, Stephen made a fateful decision to call his mother, Grace. In a frantic and emotional conversation, he confessed to her the unthinkable acts he had just committed. He killed his wife, he killed her father, and I can't even believe this is happening, she told the dispatcher, her voice trembling with disbelief and horror. Grace recounted how Stephen left Bennett dead at home, a tragic reminder of the violence that had unfolded. Stephen's confession revealed the depth of his turmoil, as he described the murders and the tragic fate of their infant son, Bennett, whom he'd also killed earlier that day. After hanging up the phone, Stephen drove to Dover, New York, where he parked his minivan in a secluded area. The weight of his actions pressed heavily on him, and as the reality of his situation set in, he realized there was no escape from the consequences of his violent spree. In a final act of desperation, Stephen took a firearm and ended his own life. The The self-inflicted gunshot wound marked the tragic conclusion to a tragedy that had spiraled out of control, leaving a trail of devastation and heartbreak. The community was left to grapple with the aftermath of the violence, mourning the loss of Katie, Anthony, and Bennett, and reflecting on the tragic circumstances that led to such a horrific end. Following the tragic events of April 12, 2018, the investigation into the murders of Katie Plattel and Anthony Fusco, as well as the death of their infant son, Bennett, quickly unfolded. The Knightdale Police Department and the New Milford Police Department worked in tandem to piece together the harrowing details of the case. The investigation began with a welfare check at Stephen Pattle's residence in Knightdale, North Carolina, after his mother, Grace, expressed concern over the comments he had made during a phone call which he made around 8:45 a.m. on the same day. When the police arrived at the home, they discovered the lifeless body of a 7-month-old Bennett Plattel hidden in a closet. The circumstances surrounding his death were grim, and authorities quickly suspected foul play. Simultaneously, police in New Milford responded to reports of a shooting at an intersection where Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony, were found dead in their vehicle. Witnesses described the horrific scene as Stephen's blue minivan pulled up alongside the pickup truck, and he opened fire with an AR-15 style rifle, striking both victims multiple times. The evidence collected from both crime scenes, including ballistic analysis and witness statements, painted a clear picture of the tragic events that had transpired. With Stephen Plattel deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, there were no further legal proceedings against him. However, the investigation revealed the complex background of the family dynamics that led to these murders. Stephen and Katie had been arrested earlier in January 2018 on charges of incest, adultery, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Both had been released on bail, but conditions prohibited them from contacting each other. Alyssa Plattel, Stephen's ex-wife and Katie's biological mother, expressed her anger and frustration over the court's decision to allow Stephen access to Bennett. She believed that the system had failed to protect the child, stating, "If anyone is brought up on charges of incest, they should never be allowed near minor children." Alyssa also criticized the lack of a psychiatric evaluation for Stephen before his release, highlighting the need for mental health assessments in cases involving such severe allegations. As the investigation unfolded, the legal complexities of the case became evident. Stephen's defense attorney, Rick Friedman, noted that the case was unprecedented and posed unique challenges for the legal system. He argued that Stephen and Katie's relationship was consensual, disputing claims that Katie had been manipulated or brainwashed by her father. Despite the absence of a trial, the evidence gathered during the investigation suggested a pattern of control and manipulation that had characterized Stephen's relationship with both Katie and Alyssa. The tragic outcome of these dynamics led to a chilling conclusion, with multiple lives lost and a community left in shock. With Stephen Plattel's death, there was no trial, verdict, or sentencing to be rendered. The case concluded with the tragic realization that the legal system had been unable to prevent the horrific events that transpired. Alyssa Plattel, while grappling with her own feelings of guilt and sorrow, continued to advocate for awareness around domestic violence and the complexities of family abuse. She emphasizes the importance of recognizing the signs of manipulation and control in relationships, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The aftermath of this case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from unchecked family relationships and the critical need for vigilance in protecting vulnerable individuals from harm. The Stephen and Katie Plattel case ignited a wave of shock and outrage across social media and news platforms. Many expressed disbelief at the circumstances that led to the murders and subsequent suicide, questioning how such manipulation and abuse could escalate to such violence. Commenters criticized the legal system for failing to protect the innocent, particularly in the light of the evident signs of abuse. Alyssa Plattel, Katie's biological mother, became a voice for the victims, lamenting the systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold. The case sparked decisions about the need for better mental health evaluations and protective measures for vulnerable individuals. The disturbing case of Stephen and Katie Plattel came into focus in an episode titled Murders in the Family from the true crime series Sex, Lies, and Murder. This episode delved into the complex dynamics of their incestuous relationship, exploring how Steven's abusive past and manipulative behavior led to tragic outcomes. Through chilling reenactments and interviews, the episode examines the emotional turmoil faced by the victims and the systemic failures that allowed the abuse to escalate. Unfortunately, it serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked manipulation and family violence. Jason Corbett was part of a large Irish family, growing up in Limerick, Ireland with his twin brother Wayne and his older sister Tracy. The Corbett household was always filled with laughter, mischief, and love. Jason, known for his outgoing and boisterous nature, was the loud twin, often heard before he was seen. At 27, Jason married his first wife Margaret, Mags Fitzpatrick. The couple was overjoyed when they welcomed their first child Jack into the world. 2 years later, they welcomed their second child, Sarah, and completed the family they had always dreamed of. With their prince and princess finally arriving, Jason and Mags were overjoyed and felt their family was complete. They were excited for the future and cherished every moment with their young children. However, their happiness was short-lived when tragedy struck in 2006. Mags, a longtime asthmatic, suffered a bad attack during the night. In a panic, Jason called emergency services and an ambulance rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Mags passed away in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Jason, who was 30 years old at the time, was devastated by the loss of his wife. His two young children, Jack and Sarah, were only 2 and 12 weeks old. It was an incredibly challenging time for him as he faced the daunting task of raising his children on his own. Despite the overwhelming grief, Jason knew that he had to pick up the pieces and continue moving forward for the sake of his children. 1 year after Mag's death, Jason needed help with his children, Jack and Sarah. He decided to seek help through an au pair and posted an advertisement on the internet. Molly Martins, a young nanny from Knoxville, Tennessee, caught his attention. Having grown up babysitting, she harbored a deep passion for working with children. Molly had briefly studied at university but felt a strong desire for a new chapter in her life. She was looking for an adventure and believed working as an au pair in Ireland would provide just that. In March 2008, Molly arrived in Limerick, ready to start her new adventure. From the moment she met Jack and Sarah, she connected with them effortlessly. Her love for children was evident, and Jason couldn't help but notice how at ease his children seemed to be around her. As time passed, the relationship between Jason and Molly evolved from a professional one into something more personal. Their love for each other grew, and those who were close to Jason couldn't help but notice how happy the couple seemed. The sadness that once consumed Jason had been replaced with a new joy. Molly's presence in Limerick had brought new life into Jason's world. After 2 years together, Jason and Molly began discussing their future. On Valentine's Day 2010, Jason proposed to Molly at one of their favorite restaurants in Limerick. The couple was happy and celebrated their engagement with friends and family with a champagne toast. Molly, overjoyed to be engaged to Jason, wholeheartedly embraced the role of his future wife. She treated Jack and Sarah as if they were her own. Molly and Jason had been dating for several years when the couple decided to tie the knot. Their family supported their relationship and were thrilled when the couple got engaged. Yet, everything changed after Jason's loved ones arrived in America for his and Molly's wedding. The Molly that they had known in Limerick seemed to have changed. She was acting weird, controlling, and angry, and did not seem like the blushing, happy bride they had expected. Throughout the wedding weekend, Molly barely left her room and did not socialize with anyone. This behavior puzzled Jason's family, as they had always been under the impression that Molly and Jason were deeply in love. One day, one of the bridesmaids approached Jason's family and revealed that Molly had confided in her that Molly had once been close friends with Mags, Jason's deceased wife, before Mags died from cancer. This information shocked Tracy, Jason's sister. Mags had not died from cancer as Molly had claimed. She had passed away from an asthma attack. Furthermore, Molly absolutely did not know Mags. Tracy, who had been friends with Molly for years, began to question if her brother should marry her. As the weekend progressed, Molly's behavior continued to deteriorate. She seemed distant and disinterested in the wedding preparations. Jason's family was concerned. They tried to understand why Molly had lied about knowing Mags. Several of Jason's friends felt the same way Tracy did and questioned whether Jason should marry Molly. One of them, a groomsman at his wedding, told Jason it was not too late to walk away from this and return to Ireland. However, Jason said he couldn't. He had made a commitment to Molly and he was going to follow through with it. As the wedding day arrived, tensions ran high. Jason's family watched from afar as Molly stood by his side. They hoped for the best but couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The wedding ceremony passed without incident, but the aftermath left more questions than answers. Jason's family remained concerned about their future and pondered whether Molly was truly the right person for Jason. After Molly and Jason married, they settled with Jack and Sarah in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. From the outside looking in, the Corbett family appeared to be the ideal blended family. Molly seamlessly fit in with Jason and his children, or so it seemed. According to Tracy, Jason expressed the desire to return to Ireland, but understood the challenges of leaving Molly. Jason was homesick and missed rugby, which he was a huge fan of. Rugby is a sport deeply rooted in Irish culture, and being away from it made Jason long for his homeland even more. He missed the feeling of being part of the rugby community and the camaraderie that came with it. Jason was also a huge fan of Irish culture in general. He loved the traditions, music, and language unique to Ireland. The vibrant atmosphere and the warmth of the Irish people left a lasting impression on Jason, and he cherished the memories he had from his time there. Although Jason liked his neighbors in Winston-Salem and his neighborhood, it wasn't Ireland. Winston-Salem, North Carolina was the place it took him after he left Ireland, but it didn't have the same connection to him. Jason missed his familiarity and sense of belonging in his hometown in Ireland. Jason always intended to return to his homeland with his children. He deeply loved his country and wanted it to be a part of his children's lives. It was important for Jason to raise his children as teenagers in Ireland. Molly had been the only mother that Jack and Sarah had ever known, and Jason believed that Molly loved his children. However, he also clarified that he did not want Molly to adopt Jack and Sarah. Jason expressed concerns about Molly's erratic behavior and the lies she told about his first wife. In 2015, the tension in the relationship between Molly and Jason reached its peak on August 2, 2015. At around 2 a.m., Tom Martins, Molly's father and a 30-year veteran of the FBI, made a call to 911. In his call, he stated that his daughter Molly and her husband Jason were involved in a physical altercation. Tom further said that he had intervened and believed Jason was in bad shape. When the dispatcher questioned Tom regarding what he meant by bad shape, Tom confessed that he feared he may have killed Jason. The dispatcher immediately dispatched police officers and an ambulance to the Corbett household, where they arrived to find Jason dead in the bedroom. Both Molly and her father, covered in blood, were at the scene. Molly and Tom were taken to the police department, where detectives interviewed them about what happened. Tom explained to the detectives that he was staying at his daughter Molly's home. He stated that before he went to bed, he noticed his son-in-law Jason was drunk. Tom heard a commotion coming from their second story and decided to investigate. According to Tom, he grabbed a metal Little League baseball bat that he had purchased for his grandson Jack as a gift and headed upstairs to find out what was going on. When he arrived at Molly and Jason's bedroom, he found Jason with his hands wrapped around Molly's throat, squeezing tightly. Tom told the detective that he had told Jason, "Let her go," but Jason had not. He claimed Jason told him, "I'm going to kill her." At that moment, Tom said he felt his parental instinct kick in and decided to intervene. He raised the baseball bat and hit Jason with it. Tom explained that Jason was bigger than him and that Jason was able to grab the bat. He stated that Jason pushed him to the ground so hard that his glasses flew off. Tom told the detectives that he was terrified that Jason was going to kill him and his daughter Molly. When he regained control of the baseball bat, he said he hit Jason repeatedly until Jason went down. During the interview, Tom described Jason as crazy. He also acted jovial with the detectives, nonchalantly answering questions as if being interviewed for the killing of his son-in-law was no big deal. Meanwhile, in a separate interview room, detectives also questioned Molly. Her story matched her father's, stating that she picked up a paving stone that was sitting on her nightstand and hit Jason as he was attacking her father. The detective asked why there was a paving stone in Molly's bedroom. She replied that she and the children were planning to repaint the bricks and plant flowers around the mailbox. At the police department, Molly and Tom's bodies were photographed and they were released. Tracy was stunned when she received the news of her brother's death. The news came as an even greater shock when she discovered that he was killed by his wife Molly and father-in-law Tom in an alleged act of self-defense. However, Tracy knew this was impossible. Her brother Jason would never harm anyone. Jason was a kind-hearted and gentle individual. Determined to uncover the truth, Tracy reached out to Molly, her brother's wife, hoping to talk to her niece and nephew. However, Molly ignored her calls and messages, leaving Tracy feeling even more desperate. She feared for the safety of her niece and nephew Jack and Sarah, and believed that Molly had intentionally killed Jason. Knowing that Jason had named her as the legal guardian of Jack and Sarah in the event of his death, Tracy made the difficult decision to fly from Ireland to North Carolina. She filed a petition to gain custody of her niece and nephew, knowing that Molly had also filed for custody. In the days following Jason's death, Molly made allegations of abuse in their relationship. A friend of Molly spoke to and claimed that she had seen Jason control Molly, calling her names and engaging in abusive behavior. Molly had also confided in the friend, stating that Jason had forced her into having intercourse against her will. However, Molly never reported any abuse to the police, and Tracy, Jason's sister, didn't think any of it was true. As the case unfolded, Tracy's fears intensified. She was convinced that Jason's death was no accident and that Molly posed a threat to Jack and Sarah. With the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, Tracy was determined to protect her brother's children and fight for their right to a safe and nurturing future. For days after Jason passed away, Jack and Sarah were interviewed by a social worker regarding their account of what happened the night Jason passed away. In their respective statements, both Jack and Sarah corroborated Molly's claim that Jason was abusive. Jack even went as far as saying that he witnessed several instances of domestic violence with his own eyes. The children were placed with Molly after Jason died, since the court granted her emergency custody. When Jason's sister heard the news that Jack and Molly alleged Jason was abusive, she suspected that Molly, or someone in Molly's family, had coached Jack and Sarah on what answers to provide to the social workers regarding Jason and Molly's marriage. The court decided that Jack and Sarah were to be removed from Molly's care and should go with Tracy. After the medical examiner autopsied Jason's body, it was released to his sister Tracy. Tracy then arranged for the body to be flown from the US to Ireland. This transportation was arranged through the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust. The Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust is a charitable organization named after a man who passed away abroad under tragic circumstances. It was established to assist families and friends with financial assistance in repatriating the bodies of loved ones who passed away while abroad. This trust aims to alleviate some of the financial burden associated with such arrangements by offering financial aid. Tracy, Jack, and Sarah returned to Limerick, Ireland 2 weeks later. Molly, on the other hand, was devastated by the decision. Unable to function properly, Molly would desperately contact Jack and Sarah, attempting to contact them through various means. She would frequently post messages on Facebook, reaching out to people she knew in Limerick, pleading with them to pass messages along to the children. According to Tracy, in the months following their return to Limerick, Molly would repeatedly call, constantly trying to reach Jack and Sarah. Tracy didn't feel she was being cruel by keeping Molly from the children. She said Molly forfeited the right to see Jack and Sarah when she killed their father. An autopsy determined that Jason had suffered over a dozen blows to the head, leading authorities to open a murder investigation. Despite the detective's initial assessment that Jason's death appeared to be in self-defense, the case took an unexpected turn 5 months after his death when Molly and Tom Martins were arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The arrest came as a relief to Jason's friends and family, who had been seeking justice. They believed that Molly had murdered Jason after discovering his intentions to leave her and take Jack and Sarah back to Limerick. Jason's loved ones thought that Molly had been plotting to take his children away from him for a long time. During the investigation, detectives obtained recordings of arguments between Jason and Molly, which they believed to be an attempt to manipulate the situation in custody proceedings. It was suspected that Molly had intended to use the recordings against Jason. Jack and Sarah settled well in Limerick with their Aunt Tracy and started to see a therapist. 9 months after Jack and Sarah arrived in Ireland, Jack made a startling revelation. He recanted the initial statement that he had given to the social worker in the days after his father's death. This time, Jack claimed that Molly made up the stories that Jason was abusive. Jack alleged that Molly told him if he did not lie to the social workers, he and Sarah would never see her again. His reason for coming forward was that he finally learned the truth about what happened to his father and sought justice. When Molly and Tom went on trial, the prosecution presented evidence gathered from the scene. During the trial of Molly and Tom, the prosecution presented evidence to determine that neither Molly nor Tom had sustained any injuries on the night of Jason's death. They argued that the lack of evidence of injuries on their bodies indicated they had not been involved in a physical struggle with a person of Jason's size. The prosecution argued that if there had been any such struggle, there would have been evidence of it on their bodies in the form of bruises and cuts. A blood spatter expert testified for the prosecution and bolstered their theory that Jason was attacked when he was defenseless by Molly and Tom. This expert showed evidence that Tom had been standing over Jason, swinging the baseball bat while Jason was no longer a threat. The expert's testimony supported the prosecution's theory that Tom had intentionally inflicted injuries on Jason. The prosecutor presented evidence indicating that Molly would have received Jason's $600,000 life insurance policy in the event of his death. This was used as a motive to support the accusation that she murdered him. When it came time for Molly and Tom to present their defense, they showed an image of Molly taken on the night Jason was killed. In this image, there was a noticeable red mark on Molly's neck. However, the prosecution presented an expert who testified that the redness on Molly's neck could be the result of rubbing and pulling on it. Several first responders had noticed Molly engaging in this behavior on the night of Jason's death. However, the defense presented their own expert witness, who argued that the red mark on Molly's neck could be evidence of strangulation. According to the expert, scratches behind Molly's ears, a complaint of trouble swallowing, and a sore throat were signs of strangulation. This expert also claimed that Molly urinated on herself as Jason choked her, stating that this is a common phenomenon that can occur if a person passes out from lack of oxygen. The defense called as a witness a nurse practitioner who examined Jason 2 weeks before his death. This nurse practitioner testified that Jason had informed her that he often experienced sudden bursts of anger and felt stressed. According to the defense, the nurse practitioner's testimony showed that Jason had been experiencing volatile mood swings. During the trial, Tom took the witness stand in his defense and testified that he felt his life and Molly's were in danger on the night of Jason's death. As a result, he claimed that he did the best he could in order to defend himself. Tom told the jury that once he gained control of the bat back from Jason, he hit Jason until he deemed the threat to be over, which occurred when Jason fell to the floor. The prosecutor, seeking to make a significant impact during his closing arguments, decided to display the bat and paving stone that Molly and Tom had used to hit Jason in the head, resulting in his death. This demonstration aimed to bring the case to life for jury, allowing them to physically witness the weapons used to commit the crime. After 9 days of testimony, the jury finally had the opportunity to deliberate. The jury only needed 3 hours to reach a verdict. They found Molly and Tom Martins guilty of Jason Corbett's murder. Ultimately, Molly and Tom were sentenced to serve 2 to 25 years to life in prison, reflecting the severity of their offense. As Molly was sentenced, she turned to face her mother and said, "I'm so sorry." Her voice was filled with regret and remorse. She continued, "I should have just let him kill me." Molly and Tom appealed their conviction. In 2020, an appeal court nullified the convictions and ordered a retrial, asserting that certain evidence excluded from their initial trial should have been presented to the jury. The decision to appeal was upheld in 2021 by the North Carolina Supreme Court. Following the appeal, Molly and Tom were released on bail pending a retrial. During the pretrial hearings, Molly and Tom's defense made serious allegations against Mags, Jason's first wife. They claimed that Mags did not die from an asthma attack as previously thought, but instead tried to push the possibility that Mags was strangled. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. In fact, there has never been any evidence to suggest that Mags died from anything other than an asthma attack. Additionally, there has never been any evidence of foul play, and Jason has never been investigated. Eventually, Molly and Tom accepted a plea deal for charges of voluntary manslaughter in exchange for having the murder charges dropped. The judge sentenced them to a minimum of 51 months in prison, with credit for time served. Molly and Tom were released in June 2024, which upset Jason's family. The news that Molly and Tom were to be released brought back all the pain and anger they had experienced after Jason died. Jason's loved ones felt that the justice system had failed them. They questioned why Molly and Tom had been granted freedom when they committed such a heinous crime. Jack and Sarah Corbett spoke at the sentencing hearing and described their stepmother Molly as a monster. They painted a picture of a woman who had not only neglected and abused them, but had also manipulated them into lying about their father. Sarah, in particular, expressed deep resentment towards Molly for taking away her childhood and her relationship with her father. She accused Molly of exploiting their vulnerability and using them as pawns in her twisted game. In contrast to Sarah's accusations, Molly expressed remorse for her actions. She stated that she regrets the events that led to Jason's death every day. Molly acknowledged the pain she had caused Jack and Sarah and wished she could turn back the clock and make things right. However, Molly's remorse did little to absolve her in the eyes of her stepchildren. Jack and Sarah continued to harbor anger toward her and accused her of betraying their family. Sarah stated that she would never get back the father she lost, and Molly's regret would never fill the void left by his absence. Lisa Cecilia Harnum, an extroverted, energetic, and confident woman, grew up in Toronto, Canada, and loved dancing. She was so passionate about it that she started performing ballet at a very young age. Lisa also loved experiencing new things in life. Therefore, in 2005, when she was 24 years old, she decided to say goodbye to Toronto and move to Australia. New to the country, Lisa's initial stay in Australia was on a 12-month work visa, but she soon managed to extend her stay in the land down under by finding a job at Australian Hair and Beauty College in Sydney. It was the perfect job for Lisa, since she had a keen interest in fashion and beauty trends. Lisa had always been close to her family, and this didn't change after her moving to Australia either. She would regularly call and message her mother Joan to share about her life thousands of miles away from Toronto. Lisa's family had always been supportive of her decision, and they supported her in her decision to permanently move to Australia too. 4 years after moving to Australia in 2009, Lisa left her residence and was in search of a new place to live in Sydney. This was when she was introduced to Simon Gitney, the man who would play the key role in Lisa Cecilia's story. A friend introduced Lisa to Simon as a potential roommate who was 10 years older than her and was a businessman. From luxurious suites to the latest cars, Simon's lifestyle matched Sydney's upper class. He imported high-end footwear from the United States and sold it online in Australia for a good profit. While updating her mother about her new accommodation arrangement, Lisa told Joan that it was temporary and she would move to her own place as soon as she found a good one. Lisa also told her mother that it was completely safe to move in with a stranger because Simon wasn't even interested in women. Soon, Lisa moved to a luxury high-rise building called the Hyde. The unit truly showed what luxury looked like. Its floor-to-ceiling windows gave an exclusive and direct view of the famous Hyde Park in Sydney's business district. Things went as usual for 2 months before Lisa and Simon developed a romantic relationship. Lisa told her mother about dating Simon and also said that she had a good relationship with Simon up until that point. But she never mentioned that she was in love with Simon. As time passed, the relationship also progressed and the couple grew closer. This setting went on for nearly 2 years before things got even more serious. In June 2011, while celebrating Lisa's 30th birthday at a restaurant, Simon proposed to Lisa in front of a large gathering that included his family and friends too. Lisa was very happy and accepted Simon's proposal. But this would all change very soon. Just 6 weeks after a memorable birthday on the 30th of July 2011, Lisa locked herself in the bathroom of their 15th floor apartment. She then called her mother and begged her to come to Australia and get her away from Simon Gitney. Yes, the same man whom Lisa had been living with for nearly 2 years and who had proposed to her just a few weeks ago. Joan, being a mother, immediately applied for leave from work so she could go to Australia to help her daughter. She also told Lisa to instantly get out of the apartment with her handbag, which she had already packed, and her passport. But before Joan could finalize her arrangements and depart to Australia for her daughter's rescue, she was informed by the Toronto police that Lisa Cecilia Harnham had died. So what exactly happened on the 30th of July? Around 10 in the morning, screams started coming out of Simon and Lisa's 15th floor balcony in the Hyde. Coincidentally, an exchange student from Japan and his brother were walking by the building to Liverpool Street to catch a bus home. While waiting for the bus, the Japanese student was facing the Hyde with a clear view of the balcony of the unit where Lisa and Simon lived. He soon heard a noise from the balcony on the 15th floor. When he looked up, he saw something horrific. A body fell down from the building while a shirtless man stood on the balcony gazing down. When the other people on the street also heard the screams, they rushed to the building and Lisa Harnham's body was lying in front of the building. Soon, the medics and the police rushed to the scene, but Lisa couldn't survive the impact of falling from the 15th floor. Besides Lisa, her handbag was also lying on the scene. She was fully clothed except for a shoe that was likely to have dislodged from the fall. While the investigators were searching Lisa's clothes and her handbag, they found a torn note in her pocket that read, "There are surveillance cameras inside and outside the house." The apartment did have security cameras that captured the moments when Lisa fell. The footage showed distraught Simon rushing to call a lift. He then briefly went inside and came back in the hallway when the lift had arrived. He had put on a shirt now. Shortly, the lift reached the ground level and Simon rushed outside, just as he had rushed inside it a while ago. When the police interrogated Simon about the cameras, he told the investigators how to operate them. But he didn't tell the police anything about the hard drive that stored the footage from these cameras. And by the time the police knew about the hard drive, it had mysteriously disappeared. The cameras had indeed captured everything that went on in the apartment just before Lisa's fall. One of the cameras, directed at the front door, showed something shocking. It showed Lisa attempting to leave the apartment, but before she could do that, Simon forcefully pulled her back inside. This happened an estimated 65 to 69 seconds before Lisa fell to her death and showed that a heated argument had taken place between the couple. Simon Gitney also admitted this. When Lisa and Simon's neighbors on the 15th floor were interviewed by the police, they reported hearing screams coming out of the couple's unit. One of the neighbors said they heard Lisa crying and shouting, "Please help me. Please help me, God. Please help me." One neighbor's door was also banged on, but soon, there was complete silence on the floor. According to Simon's account, the argument began when Lisa told him she had a secret to reveal, but would not disclose it. But things soon cooled down, and Simon went to the kitchen to make tea for his partner. He once again asked Lisa about the secret that she wasn't telling him. It was at this point that Lisa ran to the balcony that was connected to her bedroom. He further told the authorities that he believed Lisa was just scaring him, as she would usually do such things in times of disagreements. Recalling a previous incident, he shared that Lisa had once opened the door to a fast-moving car and threatened to jump out. And one time she did leap out of the moving car, but the car wasn't traveling at high speed. Simon told police that after climbing over the treadmill onto the balcony, Lisa then climbed over the railing. She thought she was on top of the awning directly below and believed it was leveled with the balcony floor. But it wasn't the case and she slipped. Lisa did try to recover while Simon ran to her, grasping over the edge. But before he could get a good hold of her, she fell to her death. An anguishing Simon then screamed out her name, which was likely the sound the Japanese student had heard. Initially, Simon's story made perfect sense, and the evidence also seemed to fit. But it also raised an important question that was still unanswered. Why did Lisa carry her handbag over the railing? Forensic teams did not find Lisa's fingerprints on the balcony glass, though they did find Simon's. Given the possible reasons for this, some experts said that if Lisa climbed using her handbag to clutch the railing, only smudges would be left behind. Simon's account of the incident would have saved him from a murder trial, had it not been for key witnesses who saw something that no one else did that morning. Joshua Rathmel, a young man, was also walking in front of the hide when he heard incoherent voices coming out of the 15th floor balcony of the apartment building. Joshua did not see Lisa Harnum falling from her balcony, but he did see a crowd of people trying to resuscitate someone. He also joined the crowd, and soon after witnessed a man in his pajamas and white shirt come out of the building. After standing in the crowd for a while, Josh continued on to work, but when he saw the news of Lisa Harnum's death on the news, he contacted the police to share what he saw. A few days after Simon and Lisa got engaged, she wrote to her mother and said that she might be in love with Simon, but she also mentioned that he was suffocating and controlling. In September 2010, Lisa wrote in a text, "I miss my family and my friends so much. I have no life." Simon convinced Lisa to first quit her job at the saloon and then stopped her from working out at the public gym. As a result, her trainer had come to her apartment to train her. He also insisted that Lisa loved the beauty and fashion industry. She should wear standardized clothing that was bland and uniform-like. This included plain bottoms, preferable trousers, flat shoes, and nothing revealing. Her hair needed to be tied back, and she couldn't apply any makeup. Lisa Harnum's family later told the press that they clearly could see that Lisa had become isolated after meeting Simon, and she was nothing like her former self. However, Simon Gitney characterized his relationship with Lisa in a completely different way. He admitted to having disputes but said they made compromises, and there was a lot of love and affection in their relationship. An audio file recorded on the 10th of June 2011, roughly a month before Lisa's death, contained a late-night conversation between Lisa and her fiancé. The file, secretly recorded by Lisa, offered a glimpse into her relationship. "Anything without your permission, without asking you, without you being okay with everything, and I don't do anything other than whatever it is that you tell me to do. You know what, honestly, Simon, sometimes the things you say to me can be really mean. You're not meant to be mean, you're not meant to be. All I'm saying is, I don't do anything intentionally. Whatever you're feeling, I don't do anything. I just love being with you. The only time I ever speak to somebody is, did I not stick up for you today? Did I not fight for you? And I loved it, but it's because I love you, Cecilia. I might not say it all the time, or I might not. You might not think it or feel it, even though we do have a beautiful relationship. We know it's real and that I love you." This conversation clearly showed that Lisa was unhappy with her partner's controlling nature. Similarly, a text from Simon to Lisa read, "Please don't let any guy talk to you or look at any guys. Your eyes should gaze only on me." Between Lisa and Simon's engagement and Lisa's death, there were signs she wanted to leave the relationship. Lisa had packed some of her belongings and entrusted them to her trainer, Lisa Brown, to keep them until she needed them. Then, on the morning of July 30th, Lisa locked herself in the bathroom and called her mother for help. This version is spaced and structured to make it more readable and convey the emotions more effectively. "We didn't know at all the extent to which he was tracking her. I just remember one time when she was home, and he kept calling her. She commented, 'How does he always know where I am?' When Lisa wondered how Simon always seemed to know her actions and whereabouts, she was completely unaware that he had installed software on her computer. He could track her calls, messages, emails, and online bookings, no matter where she was. He had even placed a hidden camera in their apartment to monitor her movements. A torn note in her pocket suggested she had only recently discovered these cameras. It was because of these monitoring tools that Simon knew Lisa was planning to leave him. He found out about Lisa giving her belongings to her trainer, her calls to her mother, and the tickets she had booked to Canada. Simon Gitney was charged with Lisa Harnum's murder and remained in custody. But in January 2012, a few months after his arrest, he was granted bail. He pleaded not guilty to the charges and was released on bond. However, in November 2013, just before closing statements in his trial, Simon's bail was revoked. The trial attracted heavy media coverage. While Lisa's family and friends were the center of attention, another individual also caught the media's eye. Rachel Louise, a 23-year-old who was Simon's new girlfriend. But Rachel's relationship with Simon wasn't as much in question as her resemblance to Lisa Harnum. Throughout his trial, Rachel remained extremely loyal to Simon. She attended every hearing, carrying signs claiming his innocence. She also reportedly contributed $85,000 of her savings toward his defense and borrowed an additional $30,000 from his friends to fund the case. Despite Rachel's hefty financial support, Simon was granted a judge-only trial after telling the court he could not afford a defense for a full jury trial. Simon Gitney's trial began on October 21, 2013, and lasted for over 4 weeks. His defense argued that he had nothing to do with Lisa Cecilia Harnum's death and claimed she intended to jump over the railing due to depression. However, this argument lacked substantial evidence. There were, nevertheless, some apparent gaps in the prosecution's case as well. For instance, the glass railing on Simon's 15th floor apartment at the Hyde was 1.2 meters, or roughly 4 feet, in height. Simon, who was 169 centimeters, about 5.5 feet tall, would have had to lift Lisa, who weighed 50 kilos, 110 pounds, to a height higher than the railing, a feat that would have been challenging. Questions also arose about whether Simon was physically capable of lifting his partner to that height and throwing her over the railing, as the prosecution argued. Key witness Joshua Rathmel's testimony, along with a video recorded by Simon's brother Anthony Gitney, attempted to recreate the scene to disprove the charges. Carrying Lisa to the balcony would have meant passing a treadmill and a potted plant in the bedroom. Both the treadmill and potted plant in the apartment remained undisturbed when investigators first arrived. Surveillance footage from the building also indicated that Simon only briefly re-entered his apartment after calling the lift, suggesting he wouldn't have had enough time to stage the scene if he had committed the crime. Additional questions arose concerning Lisa's physical state at the time of her death. While the prosecution argued that Lisa had been rendered unconscious before being dropped from the balcony, neighbors testified to hearing cries in the hallway shortly before her death. This indicated there would likely have been signs of a struggle if one had occurred. According to the neighbor's testimony, about a minute passed between when the cries went silent and when Lisa fell to her death. This suggested that either Lisa was unconscious during that time, or that she and Simon had briefly calmed down to talk things through. The autopsy report also complicated the prosecution's case. It found no signs of trauma apart from injuries from the fall, providing no evidence that Lisa had been knocked out. Furthermore, Lisa's handbag was found with her, raising further questions about how she might have continued to hold on to it if she had been unconscious. These considerations raised questions about the key witness's testimony that Simon had deliberately killed Lisa. The entire case against Simon Gitney relied heavily on Joshua's testimony, as he was the only person who witnessed events just before the fall. During the trial, Joshua agreed with the defense on one point, that the screams and the sighting of the shirtless man on the balcony happened within a very short time frame. He stated, "We are talking about a split second here. All I can confidently say is that the scream drew my attention straight away." He also acknowledged that there might be some doubt about the accuracy of his observation, given how far he was from the building when the incident occurred. One thing was clear: Simon had been a submissive partner, and there had been some form of disagreement between him and Lisa just before her fall. Further investigation into Simon's police record revealed a violent past. His first arrest was in 1991, as a teenager, for assaulting an ex-girlfriend's employer after he had been harassing her at work in a Western Sydney shopping center. A few years later, he was found with stolen items in his car. Simon also assaulted 2 police detectives who visited his home after he missed a court appearance. During this altercation, he bit off part of one detective's ear and was charged with maliciously wounding a law enforcement officer. Despite being sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, he never served full time. Simon convinced a sentencing judge that he had repented and planned to become a Catholic, which allowed him to travel to France. But Simon returned shortly after, having abandoned his faith. In the following years, he was arrested on charges related to drug supply, found guilty, and sentenced to 3 years of periodic detention. When Lisa moved in with him in 2009, he had been running a shoe importation business named Shoe Candy and was considered a successful businessman. While delivering her verdict, The judge noted that Simon Gitney reacted with rage upon discovering that Lisa had removed some of her belongings. Joshua Rathmell's testimony was deemed credible, despite a defense expert testifying that his recollection of the event was likely a false memory. In contrast, Simon's own testimony was described as unconvincing, akin to someone playing a role. The judge remarked that Simon's version of events fit the evidence like a checkbox exercise, but his account lacked personal interactions and details. The defense's claim that Lisa had tendencies towards suicide and self-harm was also rejected. Ultimately, Simon Gitney was found guilty of murdering his partner, Lisa Cecilia Harnum. During the proceedings, his new girlfriend, Rachel Louise, yelled at the judge, "You're freaking wrong." Simon was sentenced to a minimum of 18 years and a maximum of 26 years in prison. He filed an appeal against the verdict but lost. As of 2016, he will not be eligible for parole until 2031. Joan Harnum and Lisa's other family members were present in Australia throughout the trial. After the verdict, Lisa's mother spoke about her legacy, saying, "We will always mourn the loss of our beautiful Lisa Cecilia and are working towards making her legacy a powerful wake-up call to young women and to parents, siblings, and friends of these women. It is crucial to be aware of the warning signs of a controlling relationship and to take a proactive approach to assisting them,